Ladies and gentlemen, and all between the binary, this is Get Informed with Wajeeh. I'm Wajeeh Lion. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have a special guest for you today. Your favorite, Kate Justice.
Hello, thank you. It's so strange to me still to be like introduced like I'm a famous person sometimes. And I'm like, I'm just I just like to learn. And it's been really fun though. I've been just the community that I have found here on Substack is like nothing I have ever found or imagined I'd find. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, thank you. I really appreciate the fact that you agreed to meet up and collaborate. And I know you're friends with Lev Parnas and friends with Aaron and friends with the Wajahat. We were just talking about him earlier because I have a similar name to his. Which is already impressive on its own, and your work is quite impressive. I had to read your article, which is quite long. I
It
thought
is.
my articles were long. Um,
Mine are
this
long.
is
They can be long. Yeah.
48 minutes long, almost 58 minutes long, something like that. But
And
it's
that's
worth
like the
every minute.
pared down version. I mean, like that was a large part of my process is like taking all of that and like what can I remove and still have it make sense. And then so I even did yesterday, I think I published it like a almost like an even more pared down version just because it is a very long article.
How did you learn about the Epstein Saudi connection?
So I So basically, a little bit about me is I am very neurodivergent. So I just like information, right? If something comes up and I don't know the answer, my brain doesn't do well with that. Whether it's important information or not, I need to know. And so that's kind of what has happened as I've been reading the Epstein files. So, like, I'll be working on something. And I think the Saudi connections all came about when I was looking into Jared Kushner and trying to figure out why. So that's my question at the end of all of the research that I do. Every time I'm kind of wrapping something up, if I don't have a why, then it's not really helpful. Like because what I'm trying to do here is like almost like a top level. How does this matter? Why does this matter at all? What are these people trying to do that they don't want us to know about? Because there's a lot being done. It doesn't mean that it's all illegal and it's all things that shouldn't be done. I mean, probably, but I don't know that. So I'm trying to figure out why. And with Jared, one of the things that kept coming up was the current situation that he has with the EA Sports and his fund, Affinity Partners. So he's currently, I think, in for 5%, and the Saudi Arabians are trying to purchase EA Sports. With other people. There's other people involved, but they're a large portion of that. And that's a whole story on its own, to be honest, and that's something I would really be interested to hear your thoughts on. But why that matters with EA Sports in particular is if you think about it, EA Sports is a video game. Mostly they do a lot of online gaming. And what
Mhm.
they do is they have profiles on every person. This is like 500 million plus people around the globe. And they have these profiles on all of them, and they're tracking how do you respond to stress, how long it takes you to do certain things, all of these different metrics, all of this psychological information, and they're building all these profiles on all these people. And this exists with EA Sports. I don't know that that's why they want EA Sports, but that is one of the main reasons why it needs to be vetted, right? From just a national security standpoint, like what is the purpose that they're purchasing this for? And is there anything that we should know about? And
So
so I
let
was,
me get this correct.
yep,
Your lead into Jared Kushner's connection to the Saudi monarchs was you were looking into EA Sports in general, and you saw that there is a purchase interest by the kingdom, and you're like, hold on, well, what's the kingdom got to do with this? And you found that Jared, they had to deal with
No,
Jared Kushner.
it was the other way around. So I had been looking into Jared Kushner and found that he was involved in this EA Sports
Okay.
deal. And that's kind of how that evolved from there. And then I said, okay, well, what's going on? And usually what I do when I'm researching something with the Epstein files is I will find a term, a name, a business,
Mm.
something that, you know, anything, because if you put in Saudi Arabia, you're going to get a lot of different information in the Epstein files. Um, but so I don't remember what it was. I don't know if it was, I can't remember what it was exactly that I started searching, but it led me to the documents that I shared in my article, which turned out to be what appears anyway to be Epstein laying out exactly how Saudi Arabia can remove itself from the Western banking system and start to build their own currency backed by their oil. And then he went further.
Sterling.
Yes. And so this this is like I'm like, okay, well, what? And then there was another one where he's talking about cryptocurrency. And he had mentioned that he had spoken with some of the creators or founders. I don't remember how he worded it. And he had invested in other companies with people who are on the short list of people that they suspect may have been actually behind Bitcoin because, we don't actually know that. But the whole point was that he had been trying to, it seems, come up with a way to create a whole new monetary system away from the United States completely. And where Besant comes into this even more, Scott Besant, who is overseeing this EA deal, is he had overseen at one point the Soros Foundation. They had a large fund that Scott
That's right.
Besant had overseen. And they were actually a client of Ehud Barak. Ehud Barak had a company called Ergo.
Who's Ehud Barak for anyone that doesn't know?
For anyone who doesn't know, he was the former prime minister of Israel and a business partner of Epstein's. He was accused by Virginia of violent assault. And he just wrote an article, about Trump in Time magazine. So, he's still very much front and center of everything. But this particular company, from what I could gather, Ergo, seemed to be offering intelligence information, to just different funds. This is strategic information. I'm not an expert, so I'm not sure what is legal, what's normal, that kind of thing. But that's what it was anyway. And I believe that there had been, so this is where I'm starting to go back to it and kind of dig a little bit more. I'm trying to see if that was something that had been discussed previously, that Ergo might have said, this is something that's coming down the line. So it's there's all of these connections, and it's at what point did somebody know this was going to happen and we'd end up here? And so there's just a lot of these pieces that I'm still trying to find so I can make sense of this, because I can't definitively say that these people knew that they were actively trying to build a separate currency banking system from, the Western banking system. But it sure seems like they might have known that that was kind of what the long-term plan was.
Let me help you out. Let me help you out. This is where I might come in.
Yes.
What we know about Jeffrey Epstein is he's opportunist as hell.
Yep.
And he's a mathematician. He looks into the numbers. He finds things that other people don't find. And he's already has good Middle Eastern contacts within the Middle East. So his connections to the kingdom existed, but what he understood that we don't discuss in Western media is the death of the American petrodollar.
Yes.
The creation, what a lot of people don't understand is that after Aramco was created, the Saudi petroleum company that was created with the help of Texas intermediaries back 50 years ago. There was a deal made with the Saudis that all oil sales would be done using the American dollar.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That gave the United States two main benefits. One, it stabilized the U.S. economy with all of its debt
Mm-hmm.
having some sort of foreign use for its currency. Second of all, it allows the United States to have better control of what we call sanctions.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And what we have learned about sanctions is the more the United States uses sanctions, the more it has pushed the Eastern world towards its own independent currency system that wanted to operate outside of the US dollar, hence why BRICS was created with Russia, China, India, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and many of the third world countries, or many of the countries that don't have any of your um, uh, clean record of human rights, let's say in its domestic country, and would want to get away from the U.S. hegemony over that. So Epstein understood that very well, and that made his pitch to the Saudi kingdom. Listen, I know you want to make sales to China and get away with it, and want to skip the sanctions. I know that you have some shady partners that the United States doesn't want you to deal with. Let me help you skip all those
That's
lines.
exactly what he was doing. Yes.
And that's why he created Sterling idea and all of that. Well, the question is, he died. How did the blueprint get all the way to Jared Kushner?
Yeah, so that part I'm still trying to map out exactly, but there's one name that came up repeatedly when it comes to that, and it's Tom Barak. And he has played a variety of roles, and I don't know a whole lot about him other than what I have found while I was doing this. But he, back when Jared Kushner, so he famously, I don't know, around 2008, 2007, famously made what New York calls the worst real estate deal in New York history and got underwater with this building numbered 666 Fifth Avenue. I mean, you can't make it up. That's really the building name and or number. And I believe, he had tried to sell this debt. This is something that rich people do to make more money. They sell debt. And he had been successful with most of it. And there was still, I mean, a good $40 million or something that he needed to cover. And very short version of it, Tom Barak had actually been the one to make sure that that happened. He had bought that debt, or his company did anyway. And so he was already kind of in control in some ways around Jared Kushner and what he was doing. Um, and then what was the other thing? I just had it in my head. He had come up again. Oh, he was good friends with Epstein, but there was some other email I found, and I don't remember off the top of my head. But I mapped it all out in the article anyway. But he was the name that came up repeatedly that was kind of like that thread between Jared and Epstein, like very specifically. And again, I don't have like an email that's like, hey, I have this great plan. But what makes me think that was the other thing. The other thing that makes me think that this is possible, that Jared had kind of taken what Epstein had mapped out and run with it, if you will, is when Trump left office in 2020, he took a whole bunch of documents with him that he was not supposed to
Uh huh.
take.
That's right.
Inside of those documents, we know that he had showed maps or something of Iran, and it had to do with his business interests and things like that. For all we know, it was those Epstein emails. It was that map of things. It was this whole plan. It was all the information that they knew about what was coming with this currency that they're trying to build outside of the United States. Again, I'm not saying that that's definitely what it is, but based on like the context clues, if you will, of information and reporting around these events, to me, it seems like that, because he took those, and I think it was within a month, Jared launched his affinity partners. So it's like, it was the timing
What
and
do
all
you
the
know? What
information.
do you know about the affinity partners? That was going to be my next question because I have some question marks about affinity partners. Where here's what I know:
Yeah.
affinity partners is 99% funded by GCC nations, and they have zero return in those funds. Did you know that?
That's what I heard. Again, I don't come from this world. So everything I know about this, I'm still learning about like how this all works. I don't come from a world where anybody had investments. So I'm learning about how these funds work, what that means, how people make money. And yes, what you just said is what I have, as far as I understood, that there is nothing there.
Do you understand what that means?
Not fully. That's what I'm still trying to understand. But from what I
It's
gathered, I'm
a
like, that's
bribe.
not normal. Yeah,
It's
exactly.
a bribe.
Yes, yes.
When you make an investment with zero return and the investment contracts ends in a month or two, so the contracts at the GCC that
Yeah.
they have signed for their investment, they're supposed to receive return, but they have received zero return.
And from what
Okay.
I understand, the money that Saudi Arabia has put into Jared's fund, I think is about $2 billion. From what I understand, come
You,
August, they have an option to take that money back. Like they get some kind of opportunity to say, you know what, this isn't what we wanted and we're taking it back. The EA deal, I believe, is supposed to close a month or two before that. I think the month before, maybe 2 months before that. So, to your point about it being a bribe, it's like, Saudi wants the wars. If the Saudis want this EA deal, like Jared has a very big vested interest in making sure this all happens because they make money. And when they make money, he makes money. And his entire affinity partner, from what I understand, the main mission statement of it is to build like an investment channel relationship between Israel and Saudi Arabia specifically.
yes, yes. Someone was asking me, wouldn't be the GCC nations that have paid all these hundreds of billions of dollars to Jared Kushner be sick and tired and pissed off at the Trump administration for not protecting their asses during this war as much as uh, their contracts would have stated that the U.S. would have? And I'm like, yes. But then they're like, why haven't they stopped paying bribes? I'm like, because they know how to deal with strongmen.
And also, I
They
think ultimately they benefit. So, like, back to your point about how they all want to be removed from the Western banking system. They all don't want to be a part of this. That they're not friends. They're just all have a mutual enemy, and that's us in our banking system. And it has been for a long time, apparently. And this is where it's like my pattern recognition stuff. I'm like, okay, well, how could it be anything else? So that's for me where I go next. Usually when I'm trying to figure something out, if I'm like, this, I don't have the actual proof, but it doesn't seem like there could be any other logical explanation. That's where I try to, maybe poke holes in my own theories and see if there is any other logical explanations. And usually I just find more rabbit holes and chaos and corruption. And I'm like, this is insane. Like, how have we even gotten here? And I'm realizing it's because we make sure that the general public doesn't have any actual understanding, by making them intentionally feel too dumb to participate. They don't want you to be here asking questions because they say, you know what, like, again, I'm not an expert in this, but I am not stupid. I just never learned that information. And so one of my main missions as Kait Justice has really turned into what I like to call us average informed citizens, and it's just empowering people to have confidence to ask a question. Like, you don't, it's okay if you don't know. You knowledge is a privilege. It's not something everyone has the privilege of getting for forever. It's like not everyone is born into a place or a situation where they can just sit and learn. And so what I want to do is just encourage people to, like, it's okay if you don't know. If someone else doesn't know, don't make them feel dumb. Encourage them. Like, if we can do that, I think then we can really maybe stop some of this, because otherwise they're going to continue with the propaganda and disinformation to make sure that we're looking in the complete opposite direction.
That's right. That's right. Ladies and gentlemen, I see that we have 132 people. Like, share this space with your friends and family. Have them join us. We're talking about serious information that do affect your life. They may be complicated, but this is why we are covering these topics. And I'm sealing these documents that have been unsealed, but someone needs to analyze it and understand what is going on. Well, a lot of people, and there's also this heart button. Click on it. It tells the algorithm that you like what you're hearing, and it invites other people to join us. Here's what you may not understand about one of the biggest weaknesses the United States has, and it is the fact that we have foreign lobbies
Ugh.
openly operating in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
The Saudi government, excuse me, I need to a charger. I'll do it later. No, I need it actually.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Take your time. We're good.
These, the Saudi government back in 2016, you know, recognized the importance of having a lobby in the United States after they saw how strong the Israeli lobby in the US and how they could command. Before there was a Saudi lobby in the United States, let me tell you about the Saudi tricks in the US or in your Western countries. So before we had a lobby, we would call governors or we would call senators. How many millions do you need at which bank in your state for how long? The Saudis don't need to pay the senator direct bribe. Sometimes a state would have a shortage in funds
Makes sense.
and need interest or need to lend that money out with very small interest loans or below small interest loan or even interest free.
That's interesting.
So they would move hundreds of millions of dollars to whatever bank they want and keep those hundreds of millions of dollars for however long they want those money to stay in the US. Why? Because all sales are made in US dollars, so it's easy for them to move.
Right. Yeah.
those, it's all in the US
And
still,
that's,
so they can
yeah.
easily move it from one place to another.
It's yeah, no, that's the kind of stuff that I'm trying to, like, decipher in these emails, because that's the kind of stuff Epstein was paid to come up with. He was the person that they went to when they needed these kinds of tricks, if you will. He was very, very manipulative, and if he didn't know something, he knew someone that knew something. And he would come up with all of these workarounds because, to your point, the oil company that the Saudis formed, I believe there's in that email, Epstein is talking about getting $100 billion from China, but doing it by selling them part of the company instead of, like, the normal route that would have caused a lot more scrutiny, I guess. And I believe that's what they actually ended up doing.
Yeah, because they it particularly opened Aramco for sale during that time period, and it was when Mohammed bin Salman took charge and started. starting initiating his Vision 2030. And part of the idea of Jeffrey Epstein, well, listen, you don't only make oil sales, but you also end up having some funding for your 2030 projects that you want to initiate, and you're having a hard time getting foreign investments. Well, this is one of the best way you could do so and skip the American entities. That's crazy.
Yes, it
That
really
is.
is. And that same crown prince is the yeah, yep, he's the one, he's currently controlling the funds now, the Saudi uh
How?
yeah, and
Yeah,
he yes, and he is the one who personally said, no, we're investing in affinity partners, even though all of the advisory people who are literally paid to look at whether things are good investments or not, everyone said no. And he said, we're
yeah,
doing it anyway. I mean, if that
because it
doesn't
was a
tell you
threat.
something, it's like, this is what I mean by like the pattern recognition and the logic and the, like, you don't have to be an expert to hear that information and go, that makes no sense. Like, if I'm hiring people and they're telling me no, and then I'm doing it anyway, there's a reason. I'm not, I mean, no, I don't know the exact reason. I can't say that the reason is XYZ, but there's a reason. We should probably know that reason. We should probably be able to find that out. And the fact that the media and people who have the opportunity to ask these questions just don't. And they normalize things like this whole Comey investigation where they're talking about freaking seashells that he took a picture of that say
Oh
things that
my
are on
God.
protest signs. And the media is just like asking,
It was
it's like,
years ago too.
it was a year ago. And then his daughter, just fun fact, Comey's daughter that morning had won the right to sue the DOJ for wrongful termination. That afternoon, they indicted James Comey. I mean, again, you don't have to be an expert. They had this for almost a year. Patel kept talking, oh, we've been working on this for 11 months. 11 months, and today is the day, this afternoon, after his daughter wins the right to sue the DOJ for wrongful termination. She was one of the people who prosecuted Ghislaine Maxwell. And so, like, there's just so much blatant corruption. Like, it's just, I don't, again, I don't, as a citizen, understand how the people who are being paid to run our country are not in prison. Like, this is so blatant. And as Americans, we need to be able to step up and say, you know what, I'm not an expert. I don't know all the inner workings of this, but this makes no sense. And we deserve an answer. Please explain. If you cannot, there needs to be consequences. And it's just, it's not a lot to ask.
There are several names I could give you to look at from previous weapon traffickers and other things like that. Uh, One of them, goes back to the Cold War. And the historical connections between Jeffrey Epstein and a last name that you might know with the famous journalist Khashoggi, but
Yep.
not the journalist.
His
It's
father,
Adnan
his father,
Khashoggi.
uncle, right?
That's right, the famous weapons trafficker.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could look at something else called the Yamama deals, and which is on the British side.
Oh, yeah, that is very helpful actually, because that's the side of the coin, if you will, that I'm starting to move to a little bit. Like, I've kind of been going through everything and
That's
now
where
I'm
Maxwell gets involved.
yes, exactly. 100%. And Mandelson, I keep finding emails of him sending information and things like that. And so there's a lot there. And then I had just written a piece on Howard Lutnick and former Prince Andrew, because I found some emails and things where it looks like they were going to form a company together, which was really just, the point of it was information in exchange for, fees. And the information appears to be things that were not supposed to have been shared. Like, there's so much there, and that was Howard Lutnick's company. Cantor Fitzgerald. So it's like there's a lot of crossover and things that are just very concerning that everyone should be looking at. And that's why I made what
People
I
don't
call,
understand how old those things
yes,
go back. It's
yes,
very, they go back really back. Before
way
you
like
think
what
you
you're
could think.
talking about, like way back to like Iran Contra, like that's where Bear Stearns, where Epstein worked. The arms dealer that you had mentioned, he was a client there. Like they had
Yep.
accounts for him. Like there's so much overlap. Yes, I completely agree. This has been a combination of things that have culminated into what we're seeing now, and it's insane to me that there is a single person that can connect all of this.
Let me look into one name. So here's what I was gonna tell you next, but I wanna also see if he also, uh, if you have a chance to see if he has any connection to the Epstein papers. Prince Turki Al Faisal.
I don't know that I've heard that one.
Um, he was Turkey, yeah, Turkey Al Faisal.
Yeah, I'm sure because there's a lot to do. Um, I mean, I can't say I'm sure, but it's like it's if that name comes up for you and there's a reason for that, I am willing to bet that that
Well,
name is
there is nothing that came up for me as much as I have inside information.
okay. Yeah, if you can remind me of that, I can go down a rabbit hole and look in to see if I can
Okay.
find connections there. Because honestly, sometimes it's more helpful if I don't know what information you have and I just kind of go and connect things on my own and then circle back and see what information you have and how it lines up. Because I find then it's like there's no bias going into it. I'm just really kind of seeing the patterns of things.
Okay.
So that's usually what I try to do. I try not to dig until I'm
Well,
like asking a question.
there- there's just something that the Saudi government does, and no American is talking about it. When there is a heinous crime made by a Saudi citizen in the United States, the Saudi government will move heaven and earth to human traffic that person from the US back to Saudi Arabia using unchartered
Oh.
planes, using diplomatic planes, and using diplomatic cars.
Mhm.
And
Wow.
I know people personally that have done it.
Yeah.
I have a source in the Saudi embassy that told me himself that the Saudi government proudly does this so they could avoid the US media. And so
Yeah,
you could imagine what they do it for other people like myself who are against the government, but nevertheless, like people who are conducting bad crimes in the United States. So there's a lot of things are happening behind the scenes that you don't know about.
yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And it has to do with someone like me telling you, by the way, yeah, we're kidnapping people from the US and sending them to Saudi Arabia without you knowing.
I honestly though, like based on what I have learned about Epstein and the company he keeps and the things that they do and I mean that I 100% believe it because they had so many transportation systems. Like they had planes and cars and drivers and pilots and it was their sit like they had lots of means. Not to mention clearly at least through the Virgin Islands we know that there was some compromised people in customs and things like that who just kind of let people on and let him do what he wanted and I'm sure that was in New York, and it's like there who else I mean what else was there? So there's a lot, not to mention the whole Ohio thing with Les Wexner. It's like that is a whole I don't even know. I haven't really touched that one because that one is like I don't even, it's so weird. He has like a whole town or something in Ohio that's just it's like the most
Oh,
bizarre thing.
where he has buried bodies and the
I have
ranch?
no, that's Zorro Ranch, and I'm talking about
Oh,
Les Wexner in Ohio. But yes, Zorro Ranch I've touched on a little bit. There was another journalist, I think, Alyssa. She had just done a lot of writing on that. I'm actually doing a live with her next week. But there's a lot of good information, and then Zev Shalev had done a lot of really good reporting on Zorro Ranch. But I was talking about in Ohio, Les Wexner. He I forget the name of the place, but there is a whole town and it's like very much controlled by him. And it's like I've just heard so many weird stories and I just haven't had a chance to like actually look at that and like what is happening there, what's currently happening there. Um yeah, someone just said he owns Ohio. I believe it. But to that, the reason that came up is that they again like were flights constantly from like one place to the other, and like there's just they had this whole system of places, and the thing about the ranch is people think about the island and they're like, wow, you can't get off the island. The ranch, it's like uh, and he had thousands of acres in the desert. So it's like if you I don't know where the house itself is located on the property, but it's like if there was if you were out in there, it's like where are you going? You know, like you can't get away from there either. That's not sustainable. And there's just a lot of unanswered questions and the fact that they never investigated it at the time. I actually found an email of the feds telling the state to not investigate Epstein as it related to the sex trafficking. If they had anything else, they could investigate it, but not to stop. And that's what they were going to do. And then nothing ever happened. And it's like absolutely mind blowing that they literally like last month just started like looking at this property. I'm like, that's completely unacceptable. Like, there's no other word for it. They failed every single survivor and victim in so many ways, and they continue to.
not only that, they have failed every U.S. citizen.
Every one of us, every single one of us, every politician, in my opinion, who has been in office and has had access to this information over the past however many years and has chose to allow this to continue. I really, I have no respect until I hear a story that would change my mind. Like, unless there's some extenuating circumstance that they just could not, there's what I have figured out and the people involved. There is just, this is blatant corruption. I mean, there's no other word for it.
Everyone that knew him said, "Oh, my connection was, it was we met on the we weren't friends. He
Yeah.
was my neighbor. He was
Yep.
my neighbor. We weren't friends, but he was my neighbor.
Yep.
No, but my kids and I were, and my wife came on his island. We had lunch, but he was my neighbor.
Only
We weren't
after he was
friends.
caught, though, because at first never did that. Never did any of that. But then, suddenly now that we have photos, oh well, wow, yeah, oh yeah, that one time, But yeah, that's everyone, and it's just, it's it runs so deep, and it's so scary how far they have allowed this to go, and I don't know, I don't know at what point we are we lost the United States. Like I don't know that we have the United States like we think we have the United States. Like I feel like there is I don't know. It's just very scary and very unsettling to realize that all of those things that we kind of suspected, to see emails from actual people discussing these things is like it's totally different to see it mapped out like that.
There are several things that have, caused where the United States where it's at today. For the longest time, the U.S. House was designed to continue expanding. The U.S. House in particular, not the U.S. Senate. U.S. Senate was always designed to be the two U.S. senators.
Mhm.
But for the longest time ever, The US House was designed to continue growing in members. But we decided at some point that the more members we allow, the less classist we get. Meaning the rich doesn't get richer. And they made sure to pass constitutional laws changing the Constitution from continuing to expand the Congress, which is designed to better improve the representation in the United States, because as the U.S. population increased, you need increased representation in Congress. The idea is to have some sort of, you know, not equal, proportional
Right.
representation.
Right.
And then, that really made it easier for the rich to continue getting richer and to buy all the politicians. And that's why no one feels that they have enough variety for them to pick out of the representation that exists at the moment. And everyone continues to say I'm in the middle and I don't try and find myself a Republican or Democrat. All of those things are systematic.
Mm-hmm.
We have created a system, and once you create the system, it becomes a manufacturer. The
Mm-hmm.
problem becomes multiplied. It doesn't come one person, it comes multiple people. And then they also found that as the other thing is that they found as the US is getting more culturally diverse, here's where the Republicans and conservatives got everyone else. They found that as everyone else is going to get more diverse, then the minority that lives in the suburbs will have no chance of catching up with everyone else. So it's all a classist game. It's all a classist game. It's an economics game. Follow the money. That's how it happened.
Yeah,
Um,
it feels that way. I feel like in the Gilded Age, I talked about this the other day actually, but the Gilded Age, the late 1800s, early 1900s in particular, when, New York City was really all they were really building that out and everything. There was basically their version of the Epstein class, and it was they built everything on the backs of people, and the wealth inequality was extreme, and then we worked very hard to learn from that, I thought. But we did learn from that. It was just the people who continued to be in control used it to do it again, only more successfully, instead of continuing to build anything that is sustainable for the rest of us.
it's very, very sad. You talked a little bit about Nicole. I'm gonna butcher her last name.
Jukerman.
Jung Jukerman, yeah, that one.
Hmm.
Who built vulnerability profiles for Jeffrey Epstein and later invested in a car buying uh, analog former U.S. Prime Minister Barack. And what basically I'm alluding to is, did Jeffrey Epstein have a complex web of
Spies.
blackmailing network and spies, absolutely no questions,
Is
but blackmailing network
Yeah,
and the reason.
so she's someone that's come up quite a few times, especially with Ahud Barak. I think I'm saying his name correctly, but
Uh-huh.
she so if you go look, there was actually leaked emails from Ahud Barak from like 2013, 14, 15, something like that, somewhere in that range. And they have this. So I had downloaded this, multi gigabyte file of emails from him. And so I had almost this additional side of information, and she's in there a lot talking to him. And so I had seen her name a few times, but then she came up again with Tom Barak. And there was something, I can't remember again off the top of my head. I had written about it, I believe, but there was something about something I had seen that made me believe that I think she had broken up with her spouse and asked Epstein if she had already told Tom that they were separated or something. So there was something that seemed to be going on there, but then the way that she communicated with Epstein, it did seem like she was maybe a spy, maybe part of a honeypot, maybe part, like I haven't quite figured out what her role is, but she seems to have been pretty important, at least in that particular business deal. And I don't know if it's carbine or carbon. I've heard it pronounced both ways, but basically that is something that Epstein invested in through Ehud Barak. So Epstein had created a company called like Reporty or something that became Carbine. And that particular company now controls a large portion of American 911 services. So that
Wow.
company is based out of Israel, I believe. And it is at this point has contracts for a large majority of major cities and areas where they control 911 services. So they have the ability to access the cameras, record things, all these things. Of course, it's supposedly only with permission because that's the law, but I don't know that. I don't trust any of this.
Well,
This is literally
do you know
Epstein's
that
company.
do you know that the US police is trained by the IDF?
Yeah, the IDF. No, I don't think that's one thing that I knew. No, actually, I don't think I did know that.
No. So the same tactics the IDF uses on the Palestinians are taught to US policemen to use on us.
I believe it. 100%. Yeah.
The choking hole thing, the neck press is all done by a couple of IDF training firms that come to the US and do risk assessment. And we all know how well the IDF does risk assessment with innocent people who have no weapons with on their hand. And that tells you a little bit about why we have such, horrible police treatment, because our police is trained as we are Palestinians and we are gonna throw weapons and the worst things possible at them. And instead of looking at us as civilians, here's the other thing: any excess production and military supplies gets diverted and discounted to the police.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And
So the police gets militarized instead of becoming, regular police. But that's a different topic.
the police we just have a lot to do there because it's like I'm from a smaller town and we've gone through periods of time where it's like we've had police where like they were friendly and it was like a community thing, and then there's times where it's like you're afraid of them because you don't know how they're going to respond to you, and it's like I just really, yeah, that is a whole other discussion. But it's just one of those things where it's like it's a real reflection of where we are in our country, because I just really, it's so disappointing to grow up and realize that the, adults, if you will, who are supposed to be doing all these things we were taught that they do, and we're just going to be good little citizens and comply, was not at all what they were doing. It was like the opposite, actually. And then they've trained everybody to just be so blind, like to everything. And it's not an insult to people because I come from like a marketing and PR background. My career has been marketing, and one of the things that is common in marketing is something called pain point marketing. And what they do is whatever your target audience is, so if you're looking at, white men in their 20s or 30s or whatever, you would try to identify this demographic. What is it that they wake up thinking about? Like, what do they wake up when they're on their mind? What's stressing them out? What are these like pain points, if you will, that just really drive them crazy? Then they make propaganda around that. So they make things that make you feel really seen. Like, so they don't directly come out and say exactly what you're feeling, but they start to insinuate it. And they're like making content. You see these commercials or you see these politicians making these speeches, and you're like, wow, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. That's exactly how I'm feeling. And then they kind of start to build that trust with you. And it's not because you're a stupid person, it's because they're manipulating you. And then it's like now we're at a point where it's like that's no longer an excuse, right? Because now it's like at one point early on, maybe that's how we got some Trump supporters. Maybe there was something that appealed to them and they're not dumb people. They just something jumped out at them and it made sense. But we have enough information now to know he is a liar. No matter what, no matter what. Like there is hard proof that the man lies when he speaks. This is not something that you need to be manipulated about. You know, it's like you have to be able to say, well, I liked what he said before, but clearly none of that is true. And then like make a logical decision to stop supporting it. And it's like that's where we're at. And it's hard because everyone wants to be mad at everyone. And I get it. I do. But it's like if we're ever going to get unstuck in any way, it's like we have to change something.
Let me tell you a little bit why everyone's getting mad at everyone else behind the science. And then I have a few questions for you, and then we can move toward the viewers' questions.
Mm-hmm.
The studies have shown as income inequality increases, political polarization increases. There is a direct correlation between both of them. What am I trying to say? Is as the studies have shown, is when people become hungry, when people stop having the ability to have and create a political ideology because they are so focused on the everyday to day tasks, they're barely keeping up to the bills. They live from paycheck to paycheck. If they missed a paycheck, that means they could be homeless the next day, and that means a lot. And I will
Yes.
get to why that means a lot in a second. The reason that means a lot is because when that happens and people start not having the ability to have a political ideology, few things happen. The first one is they stop having the ability to have anything to lose.
Yep. That's
And
exactly.
once you have everything, meaning if I went to a protest today and I got arrested, if I'm well funded, I don't give a shit that I got arrested because I know that in a week, even if it took me a week or 2 days, I'm not going to be worried about my next paycheck. I'm not going to be worried about paying my rent. I'm not going to be worried about the whole bunch of things. But if a regular person does that and they miss 2 days of job, they get fired. If
Yep.
they get fired, they need at least 60 to 90 days to find another job so they can fulfill the rents that's due or the bills that they have or the loans that they have uh, to fulfill. Once U.S. citizens have nothing to lose, that's when people have an uprising, and that's where we are inching toward a very dangerous situation.
I completely agree with you.
That's where we are inching. The other thing, people go into their belief. So if I'm a liberal, I will blame it on the conservative. If I'm a conservative, I'm gonna blame it on the liberal. I'm gonna
Mhm.
focus on ideology and forget that there was something called the classist war. that's been waged by the rich to make sure that we're so focused on the fact that we are so poor. We're fighting each other about who we are instead of realizing that there is some sort of force above us that is choking us down, making us hungry. And that is by design.
100%. That's 100% a big part of the design. I mean, Epstein talks about a lot of stuff like that. They talk about strategy and the mentality of people and how to do exactly what you're talking about, how to manipulate things based on, income like that. When you're poor, I mean, I grew up when I was born, we lived in a trailer park, and then I grew up in public housing most of my life. And so a lot of my friends and family are the people that you're talking about. Like they will lose their homes if they miss paychecks. They will they don't have the time to really sit like I have been and learn about this stuff. They just are in survival mode. They are trying to survive. And what you're saying about when people have things in their life that they feel like are worth protecting, like a stable home, their family that is doing well, things like that, they're not as likely to do things that are crazy or going to endanger themselves or put anything like that in jeopardy. But when, to your point, when you get to a point where you are like, I am doing everything I'm supposed to do, and I still cannot get by. I can't even pay my bills. I can't eat food. You have nothing left to lose. You get to that point, or at least you feel like that anyway. Not that you don't, but you feel like you have nothing left to lose. And it is very scary when enough people feel like that because they're, they're they're reacting. They're not strategically trying to implement change. They're reacting to a situation because they have no real choice at that point.
The former governor of Kansas is a friend of mine, John Carlin, and he once asked me, "What do you think is the next danger to the United States?" And he asked me that question back in 2016, 17. And I told him back then that the next danger in the United States is your income inequality. And as that increases, and mark my word, mark my word, as income inequality increases, everything else is going to get worse in this country. I wanted to get to something that is also connected to income inequality, insider information. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz drove oil prices, especially Texas crude oil, which is considered to be one of the worst quality of oil in the global market, not because, the people who are producing it does a horrible job, because the oil that exists in different places in the
Right.
world exists in different quality.
Right. Just
And
like
the one
gems.
the United States, yes, and the one the United States has is thick and requires a lot of processing on specific plants and specific system, which increases the cost of the process. But we are in such a worse situation that even that is going at $107 a barrel, which is significant.
That's crazy.
Because it is at the it was even a little bit more expensive than the British crude oil last 2 weeks, and sometimes higher than the Emirati crude oil, which is like considered like top grade, one of the top grade, which blows my mind up. Um, People say that this is enriching the Saudi Public Investment Fund. I would say yes if sales were at pre-market, pre-war. So Saudi government production cost is high.
Hmm.
So in order for them to make a profit, the price of barrel needs to be at least, at minimum 75, 85, and at your best day, and your worst day needs to be at 95 to $100 a barrel for the Saudi government to make just good profit. UAE, on the other hand, that just broke out of the OPEC, only needs $50 a barrel to make a profit.
Hmm.
So, but on a regular day, Saudi Arabia would sell $115 a barrel, 115 million barrels a day. Right now, Saudi Arabia is barely selling 20 barrels a day,
Hmm.
20 million barrels a day. So, like, yes, the price is right, but the conditions for that number and amount of sales is not right.
So I guess my question would be, what if you were, say you were in the position of, the Saudis and you wanted that to be the case, you wanted it to increase, what would you need to happen? Like what would like say you were the mastermind behind this and you were orchestrating that? Just I'm just
What
kind of asking because I'm curious to see how your prediction pans out against what is to come. Like I'm just curious if that will align in any way because I don't actually know the answer to that.
so here's what a lot of people do not want to admit. The Saudis' calculation were very close to the Americans, which was we can take control of the Strait of Hormuz and we can have it open.
Hmm.
We can diminish the Iranian military so quickly using the strongest hegemony in the world, the U.S. military. So that was the calculation that the Saudi government that they had. So when they were pushing for this, knowing that they wanted this not type of price, you are right. They did push for this. They might have definitely calculated the price to go up to even $200 a barrel, but they did not calculate that Iran would have supremacy over the Strait of Hormuz.
Hmm.
And that was their biggest mistake
I
because
see.
Iran has showed the global security apparatus before the economic apparatus that they are capable of not only stopping all of the Strait of Hormuz, but disrupting anyone that's even trying to open the Strait of Hormuz.
Hmm.
The U.S. ships that can clear the strait, they're not even close to the strait. They're all the way in Japan. And they
Hmm.
take 3 weeks to get from Japan to the Strait of Hormuz. Why are they all the way in Japan? Because we can't even have enough security for those ships to operate.
Hmm.
When the war ended between the United States and the first Gulf War, it took the United States 6 months to clear the northern part of the Persian Arabian Gulf that Iraq has mined the seas, and no one was shooting at the United States. The war was over.
Hmm.
Just to give you a perspective. So,
Yeah, makes sense.
so
Yeah.
not only the strait is full of mines. Iran has thousands of ballistic missiles, and they have thousands of drones that the United States does not have the cost to intercept. We have already spent half of our uh, precise guided missiles, and that would take us 10 years to replenish.
Hmm. That makes sense though, that that was kind of like the piece of the puzzle that they kind of maybe miscalculated or didn't properly account for or underestimated. And that makes sense because I know Trump's big thing has constantly been about how we've destroyed their whole navy and we have control and it's we're the ones deciding what's going on. Meanwhile, Iran's still closing it. It's like, so clearly you haven't destroyed their entire navy if they're still closing it. So there's this whole struggle, like publicly, I guess, to display who's in control of this. So that, I mean, that makes sense.
Not only that, Iran still has the capability to hit all of the water desalination plants in the GCC, and they have the capability of hitting all of the oil refinery plants in the GCC. They are only holding out because they said if the US starts hitting their own refineries and hitting their own water desalination, guess who's getting it next? The
Hmm.
GCC.
Hmm.
That's the only reason they haven't hit those targets yet.
Hmm.
So, like, we have miscalculated the Iranian mosaic military strategy that was designed that if you took the echelon of the Iranian military, instead of five snakeheads, you have 10 snakeheads that you have to kill.
Right.
It's just that that's how they design their military. Now,
Yeah.
what you might be onto is Barron Trump. Barron Trump bought a lot of stocks on in U.S. and other oil
Yeah, that
companies.
insider. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I need to figure out how long this has been the plan because clearly that's part of this 2030 vision for Saudi Arabia is to have some kind of currency and banking system that is separate. And how long has this been the plan? Did those documents that Trump took that I don't even want to call her Judge Cannon, Eileen Cannon, whatever her name is, that nightmare of a
Mm.
person, has completely sealed without jurisdiction, apparently, would tell us. That would tell us, and that would answer my questions in a lot of ways, which is probably why it's completely sealed. I suspect that when Trump left office in 2020, the information that he took was related to the fact that that was the plan. And Jared is now working to make sure Israel is part of that plan. And they are aware of a lot of things that they are investing in, gambling on, all kinds of things. And that is what I suspect. And I can't really answer those questions until Judge Cannon does what needs to be done or our courts do and unseal that.
You just mentioned the Mar-a-Lago documents. You point out that the tactical strikes on Iran mirrors the classified attack plans Donald Trump kept after leaving the White House. Have intelligence leaked or military disclosure confirmed that the specific Iranian oil and logistic facilities destroyed last month are the exact same targets listed in the recovered files?
I'm not sure. I know for sure was just that it was reported anyway that Trump had specifically been telling people that it was a map related to Iran and I believe their oil. Um, and I don't remember the specifics of it. I can't remember. I'll have to look. I can't remember if I found additional information that said what he like if there was more specifics to it, but I know that it was related. And then the other part that struck me was I forgot who saw them. One of the senators saw what is sealed in the report and had said it pertains specifically to like his business interests and things like that. So there was just a lot of these like context clues, if you will, that made me believe that. But that's kind of what like the next part of this and looking into like what what do we know about that? Because like I said, a lot of that I don't think we'll be able to really get the specifics of until we can get that report um on volume 2 there.
We have brushed over this a little bit. You've noted that the recurring $100 billion valuation linked to the Ben Goran Canal and the Epstein old proposal. What specific corporate filing or control data shows that the economic development is for the zero. So basically, is Gaza's reconstruction a cover-up story for the Ben Canal?
So I'm not I don't want to say that it's a cover-up story or that it is very specifically targeted for that. However, that said, the canal is something that was proposed I think in like the 60s originally. Like it's something that has been spoken about, and it is a canal that would connect I believe it's the Red Sea to the Mediterranean. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Um, and so it would go from basically Saudi Arabia, where they are building, what is it, Noam, Noam,
Neom.
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 Okay. And it is like a $500 billion super city project. And that specifically sits where this canal would begin. And the canal, I believe, would end where Gaza is, or it would
Yeah.
go around it or something. I don't know the geography of that region off the top of my head and how that was mapped, but Gaza was an important like geographical location to this.
Yeah.
Um, and that $100 billion thing, the amount had come up a couple times, and the reason why I thought it was interesting was because Epstein, when he was talking about how to sell to China or work with China, and he mentioned selling part of their oil company instead of the traditional bonds or however they normally do this. Um, he specifically said you could get the $100 billion from China, and then went on to say this is how. And and it just sounded like it was a predetermined amount that mattered for some reason, and it also happens to be the amount that is repeatedly estimated for what this canal would cost to build. So it was just like an interesting, again, it doesn't definitely mean that that's what it was for, but it had come up enough times with like such a specific amount that was exactly what they estimate that canal would cost, at least at that time that I was looking this up.
I wanna ask you a fun fact question. You know the weird looking building on the Epstein Island? You know what that building is supposed to be?
The mosque?
It is.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know that Epstein received the a large piece, not so like each year the Kaaba, the holiest site in Islamic belief, is replaced has a clothing,
Hmm.
and each year that clothing is woven by hand with silk and gold,
Wow.
and it has holy words written on it.
Right.
And by the end of the year, the Saudi government has, and that the Kaaba only has four sides. One side is the most important one, and it has the Kaaba door
Hmm.
where you have to open the Kaaba and get in. Now, Epstein got his hand not on a small piece of that, he got his hand on a whole side wall of the most important side of the Kaaba,
That's
gifted to him.
insane. That's crazy. Yeah, I believe
Gifted
it
to him.
though. If you look at it, so like a lot of the Epstein files, there's a good portion of them that are just photos that like the FBI had taken, things like that. There is so many like relics from all different kinds of cultures and things like that. And I'm a big history nerd, and I love antiques and old things, and like I love to research items. And so when I did that a little bit looking through the photos, and I'm like, what is this? What is that? And so I did notice like he did have like a ridiculous amount of like just kind of priceless things that were just really sentimental or valuable to like a culture. But I mean this I hadn't totally figured out why. But now as I start to put all of this together, it's
Soft
like
power.
Yeah, it's starting to make a lot more sense, and that's kind of how everything has been. It's like I have all of these pieces that every time I learn something new, it's like, "Oh, okay, these pieces look a little bit different now." Like I can see it a little bit more clearly. And that's how all of this has been, and it's been really fun honestly with having such an awesome community on Substack because I'll have people comment things or send me things and I'm just like, "Oh, I never thought of that," or I didn't know that," or and it's been really good for my brain in that way because I have this like never-ending itch to learn something. So,
Yeah. Um, the other thing about that mosque is the tiles are imported from a mosque, a historical mosque in Pakistan. So the dude was collecting a whole bunch of holy objects, and I think he was having a whole bunch of royals slash businessmen from the Arab Gulf, especially come to his island for whether it's business talk or whether it's for pleasure. And one of the biggest names is Sultan from the
yes.
UAE, and 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 there's several Saudi businesswomen and UAE women that he's also very closely connected with. And that kind of like covered like once you have like those holy things in front of people from the Middle East, it kind of like shuts down a lot of the other side talk of pedophilia and other things that
Well,
are
the Sultan
mentioned.
had sent Epstein, there's an email that the Sultan had sent to Epstein, and it's literally like an article about using um
His name is Sultan. He's not the Sultan.
right, his name's Sultan, yeah. He had sent him an email about using um that specific stuff. So like not just sex, but like inappropriate things that aren't always
Uh-huh.
inappropriate, but like culturally inappropriate. And it was literally an article about how to use these things to manipulate people and to get them to do what you want. And it was just like, why else would he have this? Like there's no other reason to have some of this information unless you're using it. And it's just there's so many pieces of the puzzle that the more you put this big picture
Let me help
together,
you out.
that makes
Let me help
sense.
you. Arab men, Arab Muslim men from Arabia, especially royals, believe because it's their religious right that and Islam it permits a man that owns a slave to have a sexual relations with that slave.
Hmm.
And I wrote in-depth article about slavery in Arabia and how we played a big part in the Indian slave trade that took from the British Indian Company and went all the way to the United States. I wrote a very long article about that because someone had to talk about it. But for the longest time, it's part of the Arabian belief that owning a slave allow you to do multiple things to them. And we have different types of slaves for different types of work. We had literally, and we changed the names so it doesn't so we don't say the word slaves. Um, and Epstein provided that as a resource for a lot of those princes
Hmm.
where he was selling humans to people who still believed in buying other humans as religiously okay if it's not legally okay.
Hmm.
So they so
On
that's
the
something no
on
one
the
wants to
topic
talk
of
about.
slavery, though, that's an interesting topic, and I have to wrap this up in a second here, but I wanted to just mention this that one of the things that I found was them talking about how to basically colonize international waters, right? So they could create, these billionaires could create their own countries in international waters. And they talked about using like oil rigs to secure them and how to bit, like they had a whole bunch of information. And this is kind of what Peter Thiel's been building the infrastructure around, right? So, like, all these different components of things would allow them to be able to do that. Because the reason people don't really do that now, other than, obviously it's difficult to just build an island in the middle of the ocean. But the other reason is that we wouldn't allow them to do that because their intention is to just avoid any of the rules that we've come up with throughout the world and just do what they want, traffic people, use slaves, however they want to run things. And so that is very much kind of the hope, I think, of a lot of the Epstein class, I like to call them, is to eventually be able to have slaves and not have to worry about hiding it.
Okay. There's anytime we talk about slavery, I get a little personal about it because I had my own interactions with modern slavery as a child, all the way as a young adult,
Mm-hmm.
living in Saudi Arabia and seeing how that played into people's life every day to day lives. And
Yeah.
again, it goes back to classism. I want to go to questions because we can, and you said you wanted to leave. One of the questions goes, would you ask Kate if you would do a live stream with Wajeeh, and all a collaboration together? We'll see if it comes right in the future, and I think this has gone amazing. I would love
Yeah.
to
No, I
work
would
with
love
you.
to. Yeah, I would love to come back and chat more. Yeah.
Awesome. I haven't been able to figure it out. Ask question during your podcast. I'm sorry. Well, by the way, I don't know. There's a glitch in my live stream today. I have no idea. I can't even see how many people in the live stream, or I
Oh,
can't even see any of the comments or questions. So if you see any of the questions that are worth answering, please, take
mine's just
charge
a
of that.
little
Look
laggy, but I can see comments. I just have to grab one of my kids from school soon, that's all. But I trying to scroll here.
much fury for truth have swing. No,
Yeah, I don't see. I
I
just see
don't.
people joining now. But we ended up with like 348 people are watching us right now, so that's awesome.
Yeah, if you're watching this now, we are about done. So you can watch the recording here in a minute once it gets published. If you're watching on YouTube, you are definitely watching a recording. Take a minute to go up and click on the top and subscribe to Kate. You probably already subscribed to her. I appreciate all of your support. If you are not a paid subscriber, please consider becoming a paid subscriber. This is how we pay for these types of event. If you cannot become a paid subscriber, send me a DM, and I'm more than happy to give you a paid subscription on the house. I know times and economy are hard, and I don't want my paywall to be the reason you're not getting the latest information. So don't worry. If you can't afford it, just send me a DM and I'm more than happy to give it to you. Do you have any message or things you'd like to say to the audience?
The only thing I want to add is just kind of to your point with the whole not being able to afford things. I have something that I call the Citizen Investigator Toolkit. So if you go to my Substack, Downwind of Truth, there is a little link that just says Citizen Investigator Resources. And it is, there's two of them, and they're pay what you can guide. So if you can't afford it, you just put zero in and you can get it for free. But the whole point of them is to just help you if you want to investigate your community, if you are just interested in being able to ask educated questions. It just kind of gives you some starting points and some information on how to be a citizen investigator. You don't have to be a journalist. You don't have to be a lawyer. You just have to have some support. And this is that. So I just wanted to shout that out for a minute because I think that's a lot of people have been really enjoying that. And I hope more
And that's
people
an
will ask
important life
questions.
skill to have. It's an
Yes,
important life skill to have. If you
100%.
want to get your kid, even if you get your kids on that, that's a tool that they would use
Yes.
for the rest of their life.
Right. Yep. So that's on my website. And then, I'm here and on threads, and I am always happy to answer questions. And if you send me messages here, I apologize. I do look at them. I'm really bad at them because there's like requests and direct messages, and like there's like 5 different inboxes, and I'm always behind on that. But if you leave a comment on one of my notes or my posts, I usually see those.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Again, if you're watching this now, we'll just wait a little bit until we pull up the recording and publish everything. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. And I hope to talk to you soon so we could collaborate on next podcast.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Have a good one.